Welcome to the Real Python Podcast. This is episode 37. One of the best ways to learn something well is to teach it. This week on the show, we have Kelly Schuster-Paredes and Sean Tibor from the Teaching Python podcast. Sean and Kelly teach middle school students Python and share their art and science of teaching Python on their podcast. They wanted to come on the show and talk about the Real Python articles, quizzes, and other resources they use when teaching their students. We also talk about teaching students how to research topics and use things like advanced search with Google. We discussed using cloud-based tools like collaborative notebooks and some of the core Python concepts students need for a solid foundation. Kelly and Sean also talk about how the changes to teaching over the past year have had some unexpected benefits. They also talk about a few recent guests and topics covered on their show. This week's sponsor is Linode. Simplify your infrastructure and cut your cloud bills in half with Linode's Linux virtual machines. Try Linode today with $100 in free credit for Real Python listeners. Visit linode.com/realpython. All right, let's get started. The Real Python Podcast is a weekly conversation about using Python in the real world. My name is Christopher Bailey, your host. Each week, we feature interviews with experts in the community and discussions about the topics, articles, and courses found at realpython.com. After the podcast, join us and learn real-world Python skills with a community of experts at realpython.com. Hi, Sean and Kelly. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Chris. It's great to be here.
Hey, Chris.
It was really fun being on your show back, I don't know if it seems like ages ago in this year. So I was a little worried because you didn't put on any other episodes after I was on.
It was that COVID thing.
Yeah, kind of a little crazy.
Well, on the plus side, your episode got a lot of downloads because
it sort of sat there by itself for a while.
Yeah, you got a lot of episode downloads because yours was the only one there for a couple months. Yeah, it worked out pretty well.
That's funny. Partly why you kind of reached out to me is to talk a little bit about how you're using Real Python, not only yourselves, but how you're using in class. But I wanted to start by talking about, why did you guys pick to use Python as curriculum for your classes?
Well, you want me to start that one, Sean?
Yeah, well, you were actually there for that conversation, Kelly. That was before I started teaching.
Yeah, so we always have had a computer science program at our school, K-12, and we have the kids in the lower school going through the Scratch programming language, and they're pretty solid in it. And in 7th grade, it was kind of a hodgepodge of stuff, a little bit of Swift, a little bit of Legos and everything. And then in the high school, they were working with JavaScript and I think Java. Correct, Sean? Java? I don't know, in the higher levels. I don't teach up there.
Yeah, the AP courses are all taught in Java in the upper school.
Okay. So our boss called me in and we had a good conversation, and I was pushing for JavaScript just because that was one of the language I kind of knew. And we started researching a lot, and we noticed that Python was like this up and coming language, and there was so much to do with it. And we heard about the BBC microbit and the MicroPython modules and that. And my boss was like, "We're teaching Python.
Cool.
Do it or not."
Well, and so right after that conversation was when I came in as well. So I was hired in to teach computer science in the middle school alongside Kelly. And they said to me, okay, well, we're going to be teaching Python in the middle school. And they asked me, do you know any of it? And I said, well, no. In fact, it's been a few years since I've been in a developer role. I've been in more, marketing and technology and things like that were less hands-on or detailed. So I said, no, but I'm willing to learn. And that was kind of how we got started. So Kelly and I, about 3 years ago, started this journey of learning Python so we could teach it.
And so you mentioned the BBC microbit. And using that, is that still a central part of your curriculum?
It's part of our 6th grade curriculum. We spend about 3 to 4 weeks on it. And we've also introduced it into our robotics curriculum this year, more in depth, I should say. Sean's been doing a lot of work with coding and putting together a lot of the pieces, the ultrasonic sensor and everything with the microbit. But as we progress up the grades, it's a little bit of a hodgepodge. We sometimes get into the Circuit playground, and Sean brings in all kinds of cool things. He can tell you more about those.
Yep. So we, in the upper grades in middle school, so we're talking like 12, 13-year-old kids, we really start to get into the idea of, more advanced coding concepts. We get into some of the Circuit Python based hardware when students are into that. And what we're really trying to do is match their interests with what Python can do. And so we'll survey a lot of the different third-party libraries and popular tools. Matplotlib comes out quite a bit, Pygame. They love Turtle. Even as 8th graders, they love making circles and spirographs and things like that. And then I've had a number of students this year that have really gotten into a lot of the math capabilities of Python and using it to, validate and check their math homework.
In the process, it sounds like you use a variety of different, not only pieces of hardware and software packages. Do you end up using a particular like IDE or teaching environment and coding environment?
Oh, we'll always start with my 6th grade. So we love Moo in 6th grade. We use that a lot. The interface is easy. The kids have, the buttons are big. It's not scary. And it's just something easily to jump into. We often fall back to Replit because if, a child has a loaner tech or laptop, we can just get on Replit and code right away. So those are the two that we use in 6th grade. And then in 7th grade, we like to introduce them to the Colab notebooks just because the importing of the libraries is a lot easier for us. And then Sean does a little bit more in the 8th grade.
Yep. So by the time they get to 8th grade, they've seen a couple different editors, and this is the first chance where we kind of introduce them to a modern Python programming environment. So they might download an IDE like PyCharm or Visual Studio Code, and then also install their own interpreter locally, where Mu comes bundled with its own interpreter, or Colab, it's built in and running on the Google servers. This is their first chance where they're installing their own interpreter and getting used to how do I use the command line a little bit to make some of this happen, and use IDEs to make my code editing a little bit easier, more flexible based on what my needs are as a student. So that 8th grade year is where they really start to transition from the all-in-one, really easy, simple to use, to this more flexible, custom designed environment that they get to create for themselves.
I was wondering about that. I haven't been teaching in a school system. I taught in like a school for recording engineers, and we were just at the beginning of, maybe what Google was offering with like cloud-based documents and things like that. And I know a lot of educational systems are using Google Docs and things like that. So I kind of wondered about these sort of cloud options. And so you mentioned a couple. Is that helpful in the sense that they can keep their projects, move them around from home and back and forth, especially with how schooling is right now, with some in person and some not?
For sure. I mean, I think the nice thing about it is they're already used to the paradigm of the Google Doc, right?
Okay.
So because we've been a Google school and they've used it for several years, whether it's on a Chromebook or on their own laptop, when I go to introduce the Google Colab notebook, which is just Jupyter running on Google servers, all I have to do is tell them it's like a Google Doc, but you can also run Python code in it. And they kind of like, oh, okay, well, that's no problem. And then we move on. So The paradigm's already there, and they get a lot of the benefits of the sharing of the documents and being able to collaborate on it. It's not quite as real time as I'd like, but you can definitely see when someone's editing your document and making changes to it.
Okay. And maybe like way down the road to be like something where you teach them something like Git or something like that. At this point, the Colab is sufficient for, working and sharing.
Yeah, and it has its own, version control in there, so we can at least talk to them about the concept of it's always being saved, and you can go back in time and, revisit your progress and everything. So it gives us some of those precursors to a Git-style version control environment.
Oh, cool.
And I think like for us in education, for teaching with the Colab notebook, kids always forget to save, and it's like, oh no, I've lost my code, but it saves automatically. And it is nice when, we're working in a version and the kids start adding in a whole bunch of things and they get a little bit confused, we always tell them you can go back to the day before when the code was working and have a look at that. And it's such a nice feature. You could do that side-by-side comparison. And Sean's used it a lot. We've used it a lot for me when I've got lost in someone else's code, on the student's code, and trying to understand where they've made up an error 300 lines in. And it's just nice to see it.
That's awesome. You wanted to come on and talk a little bit about how you guys are using some of RealPython's resources. So I don't know who wants to start on this, but what types of resources are you using and how are you using them?
Oh, we use a lot of them.
Great.
So I guess it's really important to say that Sean and I both believe teaching the students how to understand informational text and text that they probably know less than 80% of the vocabulary.
Okay.
It's one of our important skills that we teach. We like to give them agency and tell them, listen, all good coders know how to research. And we start right away in 6th grade, and we've actually given them quite a bit of the RealPython articles for them to start off with. And it's I don't make them read, the 20 pages. Sometimes the articles are quite long. But
yeah, sure.
So we kind of make them a little bit simpler. But for example, the writing comments in Python guide.
Okay, cool.
By Jaya Zain. So if we go in there, I always start the 6th graders with the part where it says how to write comments in Python. Here's a hashtag, and they read about the difference between multi-line comments and single line. And it's kind of nice because it raises that vocabulary of here's a syntax error, and if you do something with a hashtag for a single comment, but you decide to go into multi-line, there's going to be an error. And it's just like a great little introductory to vocabulary that they've never seen before.
Nice.
Yeah, I would add to that too. I mean, there's really a variety of different ways that we employ the content to be able to help the students develop different skills. Researching is definitely one of them. And we also talk to them about how to determine whether a Google result is a useful resource or a trusted resource. So when they are searching for something, right, where they're starting for, how do I solve this problem? Or I have a question about this. We help teach them how to formulate that search query, but then also examining the results, because their ingrained habit at this point is to click on the first result, and if it doesn't come back with exactly what they need, they say, "Well, I can't find anything. This is ludicrous. There's nothing on Google that can help me. I tried."
Google spoiled them, huh?
Yeah. And so, we go back and say, "Well, have you tried the second one or the third one?" So getting them to look deeper in the search results or to refine their search and make it more iterative in terms of their queries. But then we also talk to them about, what makes a good source, right? So sometimes the things that are the number one source are there because they've been over optimized for SEO, and they're not actually useful for learning, or they're really useful for someone who's had 5 or 10 years of development experience, and it's good for them, but it may not be good for you with 5 or 10 days of coding experience, right? So we often direct them to RealPython because we know that there's good quality articles there. Generally, they're going to be at the right level. Sometimes they're a little bit more advanced than they need right then.
Okay.
But if they're searching for something about how to use a list in Python and a RealPython article comes up, we know that that's probably going to be appropriately leveled for them and their readiness to learn it.
Can I go back to that for a second and ask you a question about, It sounds like there's an iterative process to teaching a student to look for information on the internet. Are there like skills that you're trying to help them to develop, like how to Google and how to write a good query?
So I start with the basics in 6th grade, because when they come in, they always like to just copy and paste that question. How do you find a list in Python and type it out with a variable name, And so we always start there just in the basics of, you need probably 4 words, list, Python for beginners.
Yeah.
And so I start them with that very basic look. And then because I'm modeling the resources that I want them to go to, I always, Geeks for Geeks always comes up first for them. And that's something simple, but it doesn't really have a lot of information except for example code. And we try to send them in to look at articles or specific videos that we know we have checked in the 6th grade specifically. And the 7th grade is kind of like you're on your own a little bit. You've had your lesson. And we kind of go from there in the basics just to get them into the search.
Are there other techniques that you use, Sean?
Yeah, so we go into some more details of how to make a good search, right? So we, in 6th grade, we're teaching them, don't just search for how to make a list because you might end up with a grocery list. You should add Python to that. Then we also start to get them to look at more advanced search skills, like put in the version of Python that you're using, right? So maybe you want to use version 3.5 or 3.7 or 3.9. So put in the version that you're looking at. Then also, as you get into those results, a big source of a lot of their information is coming from Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting them to look at those pages and know how to read Stack Overflow and see if it's appropriate for the question or the problem that they're trying to solve. A big indicator for them is if you're seeing an article or a Stack Overflow question from 2011, the chances are it's probably not that relevant for what you're trying to do today in 2020. Right. So maybe using some different search tools, you can modify the date range and things like that. But we start to get into these more advanced skills that help them narrow down and focus on their problem in a more specific and hopefully more fruitful way. And to Kelly's point, a lot of that's done through modeling the behavior. So we might try to solve a coding challenge together, and I'll be up in front of the room doing the full sort of search that I would do as I'm trying to solve it also, where I'm, here's the problem. Let me make sure I understand it. Now here's my first query. And am I getting the right results? If not, then I'm going to modify it. And so we're talking about each step of that process of researching and refining searches to be able to get to more specific and relevant information.
I used to teach at a law firm, and a lot of the lawyers I was teaching about, it was at a time when they were having lots of problems with potential malware, and they were using Explorer, and they were using, kind of fairly insecure tools. And so we were switching everybody over to Chrome, but also I was like, I think it would be really good if they knew how to use Google better. So I spent time, these are literally people that are researchers in a lot of ways because they're lawyers, and they've been using things like LexisNexis and all these kind of advanced tools for that. And I was like, well, Google, you can actually put a site : and narrow it to a very specific site. There's like this whole set of these commands that a lot of people miss in that. I always forget some of them too, like the idea of like putting like a date range or just something simple of like just quotation marks to say it needs to be worded like this, So those are powerful things, I think, to teach a kid getting into this stuff.
And we also show them how to back into those keywords too, because if you pop open the advanced search window, you can always, type in what you want and then see how that modifies the query string that goes over to Google.
Yeah, and the kids in the lower levels, we like to use the image search.
Oh, cool!
Because when we're importing pictures into the Turtle module in Moo, we have to use a GIF or I think also a PNG. So a lot of the times they can't find a good picture, and so we go in there and here's how you change the type in an image search, and they're impressed. They're like, "Oh, I never knew that was there."
Yeah, you can do like literally file type : PDF kind of thing. That's awesome.
Yeah. That's why I like teaching lower levels, because you can always surprise them, and you look like you're having magic happen.
Yeah. That's always the funnest stuff. Simplify your infrastructure and cut your cloud bills in half with Linode's Linux virtual machines. Develop, deploy, and scale your modern applications faster and easier with 24/7 365 human support with no tiers or handoffs, regardless of your plan size. Whether you're developing a personal project or managing larger workloads, you deserve simple, affordable, and accessible cloud computing solutions. Get started with Linode today. Visit linode.com/realpython. That's Linode, spelled LINODE.com/realpython. Click on the Create Free Account button and get $100 in free credit. Try Linode now. Are there other particular materials that you're using from RealPython?
Yes. Of course. Uh, so the thing is I always have to double check that it's a free version of it, because, Sean and I both have the paid version because we use it a lot for ourselves. But I find that a lot of the basics are free, or if the first couple of parts of the article are free, and that's usually as far as I go with the 6th and 7th graders. But we love the Beginner's Guide to Python Turtle.
Oh, yeah.
And the little game that's at the bottom, it's by Nikita. I'm not even going to try to say her last name. Sorry, Nikita. But it's so fun. And the kids like to do the full game, and they have the little turtle rushing across.
Oh, the race. Yeah,
cool.
The
race. And I've had some kids modify it a little bit and get in there and change it. But that's like the introductory. They have a choice of either doing this one or another hour of code that I set up. And, half the kids read the whole article from Real Python's Guide to Python Turtle. It's great.
There's a video course of that coming shortly from Darren Jones.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited to get that one out there.
We also use a lot of content, not just for research purposes, but really to kind of front load some of the learning. So instead of us getting up there and talking first, we give them content to read or review and look at, so that we can, when we get into the classroom, we start right away with a conversation or a discussion or examples or something that's more interactive and engaging, rather than us just, spewing forth information. So a lot of the ways that we do that are through these things we made called choice boards. So this is kind of Kelly's innovation that she's brought to our classroom this year, and it seems to be working pretty well. But the idea is that instead of an assignment where you have to do this thing, then the next thing, and the next thing, we give them a document each week that has 4 or 5 different activities that they could choose from to complete. And some of them are required, like you have to do these 2, but then pick another one that's your choice to do. So out of the 4 or 5, they might have to do 3 of them, and they can choose the order that they do them in. They can do them, one after another, but they don't have to do all of them, although some of our students do. And we found that using some of the Real Python articles and quizzes have really helped us for that. So great examples like the basic data types article that has a video course with it. It has the quiz with it. And we use that a lot at the beginning of our courses to get students to review the material and then use the quiz that goes along with it to be able to assess any gaps in their knowledge, right? So, a student who goes through that and gets an 8 or a 9 out of 10 on the quiz correct is probably doing pretty good and remembers a lot of the materials if they're an older student, or has really good reading and comprehension skills as a 6th grader. But someone who gets like a 2 or 3 out of 10 might need to go back and review it again, and we can use that as a prompt to get them to, take another look at the material and make sure they really understand it. It's been really cool to see because, as soon as they see quiz, they start thinking grades. Like, where's my grade? Like, are you grading
Right.
this? Am I going to fail? And when we can tell them, no, this is for yourself, right? This is so that you know what you need to learn and where your gaps are. And you can kind of see some of them have that little light bulb moment where they say, oh, okay, I think I get it. It's, it's not optional, but like if I get a 2 out of 10, the world's not going to come to a screeching halt or anything.
And I love it. The other day, one of the students, I don't know how the conversation started, but Sean walked in and we were talking about data types, and the kid goes to Sean, yeah, so what is a point, quizzing him, what is a point, 4E7 or something? I can't remember what it was. And I was like, what is he talking about? Oh yeah, I forgot. I needed that was a complex number or whatever, and floating point number, sorry. And it was just funny because they start getting knowledge that is not necessarily specifically taught in class.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to go back and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I assigned that in Real Python. I better go back and read that article.
That's too funny.
Yeah.
It's great because they come in, they're like, I'm confused by irrational numbers in Python. I'm like, me too.
Me too.
I am.
We're going to bring David Amos in here to help us.
Exactly. And what the most important part of that exercise, though, is really we ask them to do a reflection on what they learned. Write down 2 things that are new that you learned and 1 thing that still confuses you.
Oh, cool.
So that we get a better sense of what they're looking for and what they need help with. And then we can kind of tailor our approach in the classroom to help them resolve some of that confusion or, explore some things that they really are excited about. So that reflection part of the learning is really the most critical piece.
So when I was teaching at the recording school, we used Moodle, which was like our tool for creating online curriculum. I don't know if you're familiar with those things.
Yes.
Yeah. And it was brand new for us. And so what we were able to do is something similar to what you're talking about, where we could front load. Our system was cyclical. There would be, like 3-week cycles that people would move through as they, progressed through the curriculum. And this, so that what was an idea was to create this cycle 0, which was entirely online, but you could basically assign a bunch of reading, a bunch of quizzes and initial stuff to, again, keep it out of the classroom, because some of that stuff can be somewhat tedious to do a lecture on, and could probably be done through a video or be done through, just simply article reading. So I think that's great. I think that's a real powerful way. Also it's helping you learn and assess, who is going to need more hands-on help, and who's going to be able to assign stuff to and be able to kind of run with it and continue to, like if you give them the right resources, they'll be able to run and keep going forward, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would add also, I think that whole reflective piece, the metacognitive approach of learning about how you learn, is really critical, even if you don't have a teacher, right? So if you are by yourself learning Python, writing down, here are the things that I know and the new things that I learned, and then here are the things that I'm confused by, is a great way to at least start that process of reflection and figuring out how you need to learn the next big piece of Python. And I think that I just stole Kelly's comment on this.
I was just sitting here laughing. So I just want you guys to all appreciate these beautiful words that are coming out of Sean's mouth. Metacognition, learning how to learn. I just want to say that my work here is done. I no longer need to train him as being a teacher.
You're retiring.
I'm retired. He's doing such a great job. No, I mean, adding on to that whole business of front loading. I don't know about Sean or you, Chris, after teaching for so long, teaching the basics of here, type prints, here, type function, that just gets so boring. So I'd rather just front load the kids on the basics and then go straight into code alongs. And I'm starting to make stuff up. I'm feeling comfortable in class where I can just go, I've never coded this before. Let's try this out. And I don't have to waste my time going over the basics, and the kids can kind of jump in and they're like, oh yeah, I read that, or I saw that, or I watched this video.
Right.
So it's just a nice way to have more fun in the classroom.
Right. Make it way more interesting and on topic, and get those light bulbs going off.
Absolutely. We love the light bulbs, so we wait for those. But it's just a good way.
Yeah, and I have to say I'm really proud of Kelly here too. I mean, this is the other side of it. So when we started this, 3 years ago, it was my first year teaching. I'd never taught in a classroom before, but I was a fairly experienced coder, technical sort of person. And Kelly had never written code before, and was a very experienced teacher. So this combination of the two of us coming together, she's proud of me for being able to say big words like metacognition, but the fact that she's up there coding along and creating Python jazz in front of the room and improvising it makes me really happy to see how far she's progressed over the last 3 years too.
So you mentioned that sometimes you'll share some video content and mix it up with some of the articles. Are there particular types of video content that works well for teaching students?
Well, most of the kids find the comments video versus reading it.
Okay.
I try to send them to their reading because we are trying to teach that skill, and we do provide them with other video clips. I make a lot of the basics. The very basics on screencast after our learning cycle that we went through last year with learning how to record good videos. I don't know where we learned that from. But
I think it's episode 48 on our podcast with Christopher Bailey.
Yeah, that's funny.
Oh, is that where? I can't remember. So yeah, we make a lot of our own screencast, and I put that up.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
That's my job this time.
And it's funny. And then I also I always say Centdex. I always do a lot of his videos. I know that's not real Python, but he has very short 3-minute videos. And
what was the name again? Sorry.
Centdex, Sentdex. He's great.
Okay.
He's fun.
Yeah. I think what we really appreciate about the Real Python videos is the, chapter markers and the way that it's chunked into pieces. One of the things that we notice with the younger students, and I think it's true across, a lot of age groups, is that it's hard to sit down and watch a 25-minute long video about a topic without having some sort of roadmap for where you are and where you're going. So the chunking into smaller chapters really helps our students, navigate like, oh, here's what I need to learn next, or I have 3 minutes to go in this one, and then I'm going to take a break, and I can pause here and go on to it again when I'm ready to resume.
And you'll be really happy to know that we do use your video on the list.
Oh.
we like that one. I do skip around. I don't put them through a lot of it. I do the indexing, and I can't remember. That one's the free one too. I know the first couple, and I do talk about mutability, and we don't really go into tuples too much in the 6th grade. I just kind of say that, but they like that one. That one's easy, and I see a lot of the is in references in their list. That's nice.
This week, I want to shine a spotlight on another Real Python video course. It covers a set of fundamental concepts needed for everyone starting to learn Python. It's also the course that Kelly mentions she shares with most of her students. It's titled Basic Data Types in Python. The course is based on a Real Python article by John Sturtz, and in the course, instructor Darren Jones takes you through the basic numeric, string, and Boolean types that are built into Python, what objects of these types look like, and how you can represent them. And it also has an overview of Python's built-in functions, which are pre-written chunks of code that you can call to do useful things. I think it's a worthy investment of your time to learn these basic data types in Python. And like most of the video courses on Real Python, the course is broken into easily consumable sections. It also has a shiny new transcript and closed captions. Check out the video course. You can find a link in the show notes, or you can find it using the enhanced search tool on realpython.com. This is kind of shifting a little bit. What are things that you guys have covered this year on your podcast?
Oh, so much. I just learned about Beware.
Yeah, Russell's great.
Yeah, I just made my first mobile tutorial app. I followed along and had Hello Kelly. And we had Allie a couple of weeks ago. Allie Spittle.
Yeah.
Spittle.
Spittle, yep.
Spittle, sorry. She got me into Django Girls tutorial. So I've been stumbling through that, which she's got some great videos. I don't know her name from Django Girls, but her videos are great. Sean, who else do we have?
Oh, we had Eric Mathis is on an upcoming episode. So we had him back to talk about making projects happen in school and what makes a good project for learning, right? And getting students engaged and interested. So that one's coming up probably as soon as I can get it edited later today. And we've just been having a really good conversation about all the changes with the way we're teaching this year, the things that we've been able to do with remote learning that have actually enhanced the learning experience for our students.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think programming in general can be such a demanding subject in that you have to be able to focus and think through the problems that you're trying to solve. And in a normal classroom, it can often be fairly distracting when there's a lot of other kids moving around and, there's always noises and sounds and things like that. And so our students that are at home have often pulled ahead of their peers in the classroom because they can hit the mute button on the classroom and focus in on what they're trying to learn and create this environment where they can really think. And I believe that that's something that we don't often create for our students, is the space to think and have some time to really delve into a problem in a way that is meaningful and relevant. And so if there's been a silver lining to all this distance learning, it's the ability to show them that space and help them think through a problem in a deep and meaningful way.
I think when people ask us, how did we handle COVID? And I think Sean and I both we said, oh, it was great. I got so far with the teaching. I saw a 7th grader, one of my 7th graders this year, who had me 4th quarter last year. The kid is a coding superstar.
Wow.
And I guess when they were locked up, he's also the one that was asking Sean about the numbers and complex numbers. The kid,
Sure.
I'm like, did I teach you last year? It's amazing. But they just had so much time during the summer, and by themselves, they weren't allowed to go out. And I think computer science, and as long as you have someone to mentor you and you have the resources available to you, I think it's one of those subject areas where, I mean, we've all learned, most of us have learned on our own anyways, but it's one of those areas where kids can just go and thrive. You point them in the right direction. Here's this tutorial, here's this editor, and just go. And they are really feeling successful, I think. So it's quite a nice.
I was wondering about, we include materials with the video courses like PDFs and code samples. And I wonder in some cases if that's helpful for you guys in teaching.
I have not utilized code samples. I find that sometimes when the kids get a whole code, they'll just skip.
Okay.
They don't like to read. So I try to avoid giving them documentation. I tend to send them to the book, and I don't tell them that most of the stuff is on GitHub.
Right.
I try to avoid that because I find, and Sean and I both agree, that when the kids are typing, they're making those errors.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're making errors, there's a name error, there's a syntax error, it's just teaching them to be more cognizant about their typing. And the more they type, the more they learn. So I try to avoid code samples where they can copy and paste.
Is this a place where they're learning to type for the first time too?
No, they've typed in the past, but some of the characters, like the asterisk or the curly brackets.
Oh yeah.
They're items that they don't really use on a normal basis, hashtags.
Right.
Although they use them on their phone.
Sure.
But I don't know. So they're still using that peck and look kind of thing at the beginning.
It is kind of fun because I do tell them from time to time at the beginning of the course to really look at your keyboard and look at every single character that's on their keyboard, because at some point they will use it in Python. Right?
Yeah, pretty much.
And they discover keys that they have never pressed before, except maybe by accident. And I give them names for everything. We build a lot of vocabulary around just the characters that they're using. And so they're really having to think about what they're typing and why.
Yeah, what was the name? Yeah, what was the name of the one that, and I was like, oh, I didn't know what that was called. You said it in class the other day.
What was it? The curly brace?
No, it was like a modulus one, but it wasn't the modulus. I forget.
Oh,
but I was like, oh, that's what
that's a modulo? Yeah.
No, it was something else he said. I forget. I'll think of it later. I always do. And the pipe, I was like, and that's a pipe. They're like, what?
What do you mean pipe? Yeah. Yeah, you end up using a lot of them. I'm just looking at it.
Yeah, you never actually look at your keyboard until you're like, wait a minute, I've used this for, okay, that's for comments. This one's for modulo. Here's the, tilde that we use sometimes for, everything has a purpose.
Yeah.
The last area that really has been useful for us is for the long form tutorials on Real Python. So we bake in time in our course for our students to be able to demonstrate their learning. So they have time to really explore a topic on their own and show how they've integrated all this newfound knowledge together. And a lot of students will go to, say, the arcade tutorial that just came out, I think, this year or late last year, to be able to make a game. And they can go through that in detail. I had one student who came up with making a binary search in Python. And
wow.
I don't think she really understood what she was getting into. She says it looks interesting. And then I think about halfway through, she's like, how about I do something with turtle instead? And I said, no, you got to stay on the binary search. It's way better than you think it's going to be. But those longer form tutorials have been really helpful for giving a student the ability to work through a longer, more complex project at their own pace and see how something fits together with the commentary and the feedback from the author to say, not just here's a bunch of code, but here's why I'm doing this, or here's why we're doing this next step, and here's how it builds on the previous steps. So that's been really useful for our students to delve into a deeper, longer project towards the end of their learning.
Yeah, and then last year when I was running out of things to talk about, because we passed our curriculum that we were supposed to be doing in 7th grade, we actually did it was like a facial recognition one from Real Python. I don't remember which one it was called, but it was a short tutorial, and we could go in there and upload a picture, and it was pretty cool.
There's a new, pretty recent one that's a sort of introduction to data science and modeling science.
I saw that. I actually bookmarked it.
Yeah, I think that would be really good. And we just got the video version of that one that came out. And it's kind of short, and you're modeling a movie theater, which I think a lot of people, I mean, obviously it's a little kind of sad right now, but a lot of people can relate to the idea of like, okay, there's all these positions, and if I was going to be the manager of this place, and there's so many like games that kids probably could think of, like, that they play themselves to optimize the flow of all these different, be it resources or whatever, all the types of games that are out there. But that this is a way they could do that through sort of data science. And it's fairly short, which I think would be an okay topic for kids to get into.
Yeah. What was that? I think I saw it the other day and I bookmarked it. It was going in and also managing the amount of people or something. And yeah, that's out on my own personal to-do list.
Yeah.
Anything data science, I always go and I search at, because they have the Django one on there as well.
Well, I have these weekly questions that I like to ask everybody who comes on the show. And I guess we could start with you, Sean, and if you have to go.
Sure.
So what's something that you're excited about right now in the world of Python?
Well, I'm really excited to delve deeper into Python 3.9. I think that's the third time I've said delve this podcast, so sorry about that.
It's okay. Get your minor hat on.
Yeah. So one of the projects that I did last year, and I need to update it for this year, is a web-based bell schedule for our middle school. So just a simple serverless function that goes through and each day tells you the schedule for that day in JSON format. So you can use it in a lot of different things. But when I did it, I had to do it all with, time zone support and everything, because I wanted it to be fairly robust. They cover daylight savings times and things like that. So I'm really excited about the new built-in support for time zone information in Python 3.9. And so one of the things that I have on my to-do list is to rewrite that for our new weird COVID schedule that we're doing, but also to upgrade it to Python 3.9 so that I can use all that built-in stuff instead of having to go to a third-party library for it.
Nice. And what's something that you want to learn next?
Well, the big thing on my list next is another utility library that I created for an API that we have at our school to manage all of our iPads. And the next thing I want to learn is how to create effective mock objects for the testing library that I wrote for it, or the test suite that I wrote for it. So instead of hitting the API with live data, that it actually runs everything against mocked objects or fake requests. So it's something that I have on my list to learn next, because I think once I get the hang of it, it can be really useful in a lot of other areas too.
Okay, cool. Do you have to go right now?
Yeah, I do have to split. I'm supposed to be somewhere at noon, and I have about a 10-minute drive, so I'm down to the wire, I think. But this has been really fun to reconnect, Christopher, and talk through everything with Real Python.
It was so awesome to talk to you again, too.
All right. Take care, Christopher. Bye, Kelly.
Bye.
So what are you excited about in the world of Python right now? Again, it could be like an event or a book or what have you.
So I have been dreaming of this project, and I'm just starting to map out my idea clearly, I guess. It's been something I've talked about since we first interviewed Eric a year ago, Eric Mathis, and it's this idea of making this database on skills for students. And we just recently spoke to Eric Mathis, and he kind of gave me some motivation, and he's got a lot of information, a lot of code of, I think it's also in his book about data science.
Okay.
So I've been using that and hacking through that. That's kind of where the Django tutorials came in, where I thought, I need to get something up on the web. So I have a place to put my dashboard for education. So that's kind of my project. I'm really far behind. Every time Sean looks at me, I've gone and found like 6 different ways to put in a CSV, or I'm like, I don't know which one should I use. So I'm back down to the basics of just listing out the things and kind of going there. Sean's project for me, though, because he's always pushing me, is really getting into doing more of the GitHub and trying to fork. He's been sending me these codes and making me learn how to fork things and add stuff to it. Try to do the Hacktoberfest with Git, but I just didn't get there. So much going on.
There's a lot going on. Yeah, especially with school too. So
yeah. Absolutely. And then we just bought the Beyond the Basic stuff with Python from Al, and I'm on the early release one, the early access PDF, and I just reading that. It's so great, and seeing he's just an easy reader, It's one of those things you just kind of can keep going with it. So it's nice. But that's a lot of little things.
Yeah, it sounds like it. That's cool. Are you hosting it? Does the school provide you space, or you set that up yourself to host this Django thing?
Just on myself right now, I haven't gotten very far. Everything's locally.
Okay.
I'm actually working in a Colab notebook right now because every time I go in, I've been on a personal fight between whether I'm going to use PyCharm or Visual Studio.
Sure.
So I was getting used to Visual Studio with the Lego programming, but I don't know. I liked PyCharm, and then I don't know, the whole VENV. I don't know how you guys pronounce it. VEM space is a lot for a new person.
Yeah.
And you get kind of lost. And I was also doing Terminal, so learning all about Terminal and kept at.
That's great in his book.
Yeah, I was yelling at Russell saying, "Why Terminal?" in our last episode.
I'll have to listen to that.
And it's a great one. He explained it really well. And because I was just like, why do I have to install Beware through Terminal when I could just go into my Finder and make my own folder? And I think there's things that happen with newbies. We do stuff because that's the way the programmers had always learned how to do stuff. So it's one of those things that you have to be cognizant of when you're teaching someone who's never coded before.
Yeah, totally.
So
what do you want to learn next? I mean, you mentioned several things there, but is there any other specific things that you want to learn next?
No, we're just, I think Sean and I both are rethinking how can we do stuff different in our class. We always change. We try not to change too much during the year.
Yeah.
But in the end, we always do because we get bored. We're going to do the card game or we'll do something else. And I think just being able to make and show them more examples, they end up producing other things for us. So I don't know, we're making all kinds of things. Sean's made all kinds of crazy hardware stuff in the classroom. And, you name it, we've tried it. So it's
I need somebody to give me those assignments so I get them done.
Well, you can.
Because I have a bunch of the hardware at my house here, and I just have not been making the time. I've been, getting all these other things going. So
we decided to ditch the microbit kits where they already have the robot designed, and there's a whole bunch of different kits out there for the microbit robots, and we're making our own. And we're piecemealing it. We've made up these little Ziploc bags for all the students, and we've given them ultrasonic sensors and deep boards, breakout boards, and breadboards, and jumper cables, and wires. So we'll send you some of that stuff, and you can compete with us. We're going to do battle bots.
All right, that sounds fun.
Hopefully,
yeah. Cool. What were things that you were happy about? The change from switching from potentially teaching JavaScript to now teaching Python. What are changes about teaching those different languages that you enjoy that has made that easier for you, I guess?
I think for me, working with Python versus the other codes, and I guess I should say more like looking into Swift because we also looked into using that.
Sure.
I just think it's something more tangible. I feel like you can easily jump in. We take kids that have never coded before in a language, maybe a little bit of Scratch. And in 9 weeks, we have them coding, 200, 300 lines of code and making up their own apps. They've made Mad Libs. They've done designs with Turtle. And these are things that aren't like boxed. They're not finding it off the web and copying and pasting it. They're actually coding their own stuff. So I think that's the one thing I really love about Python. I can guarantee, and I say this to all the parents when they're freaking out that their child is stressed out the first 2 weeks. I'm like, I've done this 28 times in 2.5 years. I promise you that by the end of the 9 weeks, your kid is going to be begging to come back to class. And it's happened. Maybe 1 or 2 kids that hasn't. I know that sounds a little bit egotistical, but it's not because of me. It's because of the language.
That's cool.
Python is just something that's so awesome that if the kids want to build an app, I can give them that. If they want to draw with Python or Turtle, I can give them that. If they want to use hardware, I can give them that. And I just think that it's one of those languages that is accessible, and that's kind of why I love it.
That's awesome. Well, I really want to thank you guys for coming on the show, and it was so much fun talking to you again.
Thank you so much. I mean, we love what you guys do, and you're such a great resource for us at school that we just wanted to say thank you.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Get started with Linode today. Visit linode.com/realpython and get $100 in free credit when you create your account. Try Linode now. I want to thank Kelly and Sean for coming on the show. And I want to thank you for listening to the Real Python podcast. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast in your favorite player. And if you like the show, leave us a 5-star rating and a review. You can find show notes with links to all the topics we spoke about inside your podcast player or at realpython.com/podcast. And while you're there, you can leave us a question or a topic idea. I've been your host, Christopher Bailey, and I look forward to talking to you soon.